The steel door groans as it slides open, echoing through the sterile white corridor like the death rattle of hope itself. Inside the chamber, fluorescent lights hum with an intensity that feels almost accusatory, illuminating every corner of a room that hasn't seen natural sunlight in 3 years. At the center, suspended in a crystalline containment field that shimmers with otherworldly energy, floats a man. Not a monster, not a demon. Just a man named Kael Vorthen, whose very existence is an apocalypse waiting to happen. His hands are bound in specialized restraints that glow with suppression runes, each symbol painstakingly crafted by the finest enchanters across 17 dimensions. Tubes snake from his arms, pumping synthetic nutrients directly into his bloodstream, bypassing the one biological function that normal humans take for granted. The one function that, for Kael, triggers the end of everything. Eating. See, Kael Vorthen isn't contained here because he's evil. He's not a tyrant, not a warlord, not even particularly angry at the world. He's imprisoned because he's the single most dangerous entity in the multiverse, and it all comes down to something absurdly simple. Every time food passes his lips, every single morsel that touches his tongue, reality itself begins to unravel. The scientists call it omni-adaptive consumption syndrome. The guards just call it the end. Because that's what happens. Bread gives him the power to reshape matter with a thought, turning entire continents into abstract sculptures of impossible geometry before anyone realizes what's happening. Rice grants him control over time itself, rewinding or fast-forwarding sections of the world until causality collapses into paradox. A simple apple? Gravity manipulation so profound that planets pull themselves inside out, their cores exposed to the void of space as their surfaces fold inward, like origami made of flesh and stone. World number 1 fell to a bowl of soup. Nobody even knew what was happening at first. Kael was 16, sitting in his family's kitchen in a dimension where magic and technology had merged seamlessly, where flying cars hummed between crystalline towers and people could live for centuries in perfect health. He'd come home from academy studies, tired and hungry, and his mother had prepared his favorite meal. A hearty vegetable soup, the kind that warmed you from the inside out on cold winter days. The first spoonful changed everything. Power flooded into him like liquid lightning, and before he could even gasp, before his mind could process what was happening, energy erupted from his body in concentric waves of pure destructive force. The kitchen walls evaporated, then the house, then the neighborhood. The wave expanded at the speed of thought, disintegrating matter, warping reality, pulling dimensions into collision. By the time the soup bowl clattered to the ground, half the continent had become a swirling vortex of unreality, a place where the laws of physics went to die screaming. Kael stood at the center of it all, power coursing through him in ways he couldn't comprehend, watching in horror as his world literally came apart at the seams. Mountains rose and fell like waves on an ocean. Cities folded into themselves, their buildings compressed into singularities that blinked out of existence. The sky cracked, revealing the void between dimensions, and things that should never have existed crawled through those cracks, drawn by the chaos like moths to a flame. Within 72 hours, world number 1 was gone. Completely. Not destroyed in the traditional sense, not reduced to rubble or ash. It simply ceased to be, unwritten from the fabric of reality, as if it had never existed at all. 17 billion people, their histories, their dreams, their legacies, all of it erased. And Kael survived, because apparently his power ensured his own survival, even as it annihilated everything around him. The dimensional authorities found him floating in the void, where his world used to be, catatonic with shock, still radiating the energy from that single bowl of soup. They took him to world number 2, a militaristic dimension where order was maintained through strength and discipline. They promised they could contain him, cure him, help him control whatever had gone wrong. They were wrong. World number 2 lasted 3 weeks before someone made a critical mistake. A guard, feeling sorry for the traumatized teenager, slipped him a piece of chocolate. Just a small piece, barely the size of a coin, thinking it might provide some comfort. That piece of chocolate granted Kael the ability to manipulate biological matter, and within minutes, every living thing in that dimension began evolving at an exponential rate. Plants developed consciousness and mobility, turning cities into jungles of writhing, thinking vegetation. Animals transformed into creatures that defied categorization, their forms shifting and changing moment by moment. Humans found their bodies rebelling against them, cells multiplying and mutating without limit. The dimensional coalition evacuated what they could, pulling refugees through hastily constructed portals before the evolution cascade reached critical mass. They saved maybe 10% of the population before world number 2 became a screaming biomass of pure evolution run amok, a cancerous growth on the face of the multiverse that had to be sealed away behind dimensional barriers that required constant maintenance to this day. That's when they realized the terrible truth. It wasn't a fluke. It wasn't something they could cure. Every single thing Kael ate, no matter how small, no matter how carefully controlled, triggered a different catastrophic power. And once activated, those powers operated on scales that dwarfed anything the multiverse had ever seen. They tried everything. They brought in dimensional shamans who attempted to purge whatever dark force had infected him. They consulted with gods and demons, with entities that existed outside traditional reality, with machines that could calculate 1 trillion futures in a nanosecond. Nothing worked. So they moved him again, and again, and again. Each world fell to a different food, a different power, a different flavor of apocalypse. World number 3 drowned when he drank water, the oceans rising to consume the sky itself, until the entire dimension was nothing but an infinite ocean with no surface, no bottom, just endless dark water in every direction. World number 4 burned when he ate peppers, flames spreading not just through physical space but through time itself, incinerating the past and future simultaneously until the dimension existed as nothing but an eternal moment of fire. World number 7 fragmented when he consumed rice, breaking into infinite parallel versions of itself, each one slightly different. Each one slowly pulling away from the others until the dimensional fabric simply couldn't hold together anymore. World number 12 turned to crystal when he ate salt, every molecule reorganizing itself into geometric perfection, beautiful and deadly and absolutely incompatible with biological life. World number 23 reversed when he ate strawberries, time flowing backwards faster and faster until it reached a point before the dimension existed, and then even that moment unraveled. The pattern repeated 998 times. 998 worlds, each one with its own civilizations, its own history, its own unique beauty and tragedy. Gone. All because Kael Vorthen had the misfortune of being hungry and the curse of surviving his own destructive power. Now, in world number 999, they've finally accepted the truth. He can't be cured. He can't be contained safely. His very existence is a threat to reality itself. But they can't kill him either, because every time they tried, his power activated automatically to preserve his life, usually by destroying whatever world they were in at the time. So instead, they've built this facility, a massive complex that exists partially outside normal dimensional space, anchored to world 999 but not entirely part of it. A prison designed by the greatest minds of 1,000 worlds, all working toward a single goal: keep Kael Vorthen from eating anything ever again. The nutrient solution that flows through his veins is synthetic, created by nanotechnology that assembles molecules directly in his bloodstream, bypassing his digestive system entirely. It provides everything his body needs to survive without triggering the consumption mechanism that activates his power. It's a miserable existence, a half-life sustained by machines, but it's the only way to keep World 999 from becoming number 1000. Kael floats in his containment field, conscious but barely aware, his mind dulled by sedatives that keep him from thinking too hard about what he's lost, what he's destroyed, what he's become. Around him, teams of scientists work 24-hour shifts, monitoring every vital sign, every flicker of energy, every microscopic change in his condition. One mistake, one moment of carelessness, and World 999 joins the list of casualties. The facility director, a stern woman named Dr. Yenna Cross, who lost her family in World number 47, stands in the observation deck, watching Kael through reinforced glass that could withstand a nuclear blast. She's been with him for 200 worlds now, transferred from facility to facility as each successive dimension fell. She's seen him as a terrified teenager, as a broken young man begging for death, as the sedated shell he is now. And she knows, in her heart, that this can't continue forever. But for now, in World 999, they maintain the vigil. They keep the machines running. They monitor the containment field. They pray to whatever gods might be listening that today won't be the day something goes wrong. Because if it does, if even a single molecule of food reaches Kael's tongue, if the containment fails or the systems malfunction or someone makes a terrible mistake, then World 999 will fall. And somewhere in the multiverse, work will begin on facility number 1000. The question isn't if Kael will eat again. Given infinite time, all security systems eventually fail. All prisons eventually crumble. All safeguards eventually break down. The question is when. And more importantly, whether there's any force in the multiverse that can stop what happens next. To understand how impossible this situation truly is, you need to comprehend the sheer scale of what Kael's power represents. When we talk about powers in stories, we usually mean someone can shoot fire or fly or read minds. Impressive abilities, certainly, but limited in scope and effect. Kael's power operates on a completely different level. It doesn't just give him abilities. It rewrites fundamental laws of reality, based on what he consumes. The nutrients in food become fuel for reality manipulation, and the more complex the food, the more complex and devastating the effect. World number 34 fell to honey. Sweet, simple honey, something that humans had been eating for tens of thousands of years in that dimension without incident. When Kael consumed it, he gained the power to control collective consciousness, binding the minds of entire populations together into hive entities that operated with disturbing efficiency, but no individual will. Within days, the entire population of that world had merged into vast thinking masses, cities full of bodies moving in perfect synchronization, speaking in unified voices, losing all sense of individual identity. They evacuated Kael before the process completed, but they couldn't save the people. The hive minds continued to grow, to merge, until the entire dimensional population became a single consciousness spread across billions of bodies. World number 56 fell to coffee. The caffeine triggered a power that accelerated entropy, causing everything to age at an exponential rate. Buildings crumbled to dust in hours. Mountains eroded into plains in days. Even the stars in that dimension's sky began to die, their fusion reactions rapidly depleting as time itself seemed to speed up everywhere except in Kael's immediate vicinity. They extracted him before he aged to death. But the world became a gray wasteland, entropy having run its course in the span of weeks rather than billions of years. World number 73 fell to bread. Simple wheat bread, one of humanity's oldest foods, became the trigger for a power that converted matter into pure information. Objects didn't disappear. They transformed into data, becoming strings of code that hung in the air like ghostly afterimages of what they used to be. Buildings became mathematical equations. People became probability distributions. The entire world gradually digitized. Reality itself turning into a simulation that couldn't run because there was no longer any hardware to process it. Somewhere, in some database that exists between dimensions, World 73 still exists as pure information, waiting for someone to compile it back into reality. The variety of powers is what makes Kael so impossibly dangerous. If it was always the same ability, maybe they could prepare for it, mitigate it, find some way to counteract the effect. But it's different every single time, determined by some unfathomable algorithm that translates the chemical composition of food into reality-warping effects. Proteins become matter manipulation. Carbohydrates become energy control. Vitamins become probability alteration. Minerals become dimensional shifting. And those are just the simple correlations. The actual mechanics are so complex that entire teams of dimensional physicists have spent decades trying to map them, with limited success. Dr. Cross remembers the early days, back when they still thought they could solve this problem through science and magic working together. They'd brought in experts from every field imaginable. Theoretical physicists who could calculate across 11 dimensions. Archmages who commanded forces that predated the universe itself. Bioengineers who could rewrite DNA with a thought. They all examined Kael, ran every test imaginable, tried every treatment they could conceive. One team theorized that his cells had been altered at a quantum level, that every atom in his body was somehow connected to a reservoir of infinite energy that responded to the act of eating. Another group believed he'd been touched by an outer god, one of those incomprehensible entities that exist outside normal reality, whose very attention can warp the fabric of existence. A third faction was convinced he'd somehow become a living dimensional anchor, a fixed point around which reality organized itself, and consuming food destabilized that organization in catastrophic ways. They were all partially right and completely wrong. The truth, as near as anyone could determine, was that Kael had become something unprecedented in the multiverse. A being whose very existence violated the conservation laws that governed reality. Where normal creatures took in energy and matter and processed them according to predictable biological rules, Kael took in energy and matter and generated effects that shouldn't have been possible, that required more power than existed in entire galaxies, that operated on principles that defied everything they knew about how the multiverse functioned. The accident that created him happened in world number 1, though nobody knew it was an accident at the time. His mother had been a dimensional researcher, one of the leading experts in cross-reality phenomena. She'd been studying something called dimensional resonance, the way that energy vibrations could propagate across different planes of existence. Her laboratory was in their basement, hidden away behind normal doors and normal walls, a secret research project funded by organizations that asked no questions as long as the results were interesting. On the day it happened, on the day Kael turned 16, she'd been running an experiment with exotic particles, matter that existed in a state of quantum superposition across multiple dimensions simultaneously. The equipment had malfunctioned, just a minor power surge, nothing that should have caused any problems. But that surge had interacted with a dimensional catalyst she'd been synthesizing, and the resulting energy pulse had propagated through the house, invisible, undetectable, passing through walls and floors and people as if they weren't there. Kael had been in his room, doing homework, completely unaware that he'd just been bathed in radiation from outside normal reality. The changes were subtle at first, small alterations to his cellular structure that wouldn't manifest until his body needed to process energy from an outside source, until he ate. His mother never knew. She died with the rest of world number 1, vaporized in the first wave of destruction, her research destroyed, her notes lost forever. The dimensional authorities managed to recover some of her work from backup facilities in other dimensions, enough to piece together what had probably happened, but not enough to reverse it. Kael carried the legacy of that accident in every cell of his body, a living weapon created entirely by chance. In the early worlds, before they'd refined the containment procedures, Kael had been conscious and aware of what was happening to him. He'd watched himself destroy world after world, powerless to stop it, screaming inside his own head as his body generated apocalypse after apocalypse. The guilt had nearly killed him. There were suicide attempts, dozens of them, but his power protected him even from himself, healing injuries instantly, reversing poisons, reconstructing his body from even the most catastrophic damage. World number 91 saw him try to throw himself into a black hole, hoping that not even his power could survive the infinite gravity of a collapsed star. The black hole evaporated instead, its mass converted into pure energy that scattered across the dimension, and Kael emerged unscathed, floating in the void where the black hole used to be. World number 112 saw him volunteer for experimental dimensional dissolution, a process that should have scattered his atoms across infinity. Instead, the dissolution chamber imploded, and Kael reformed, his power simply refusing to allow his existence to end. Eventually, they'd started the sedation protocols, keeping him in a twilight state between waking and sleeping, his consciousness suppressed enough that he couldn't actively try to kill himself, but maintained enough that his autonomic functions continued. It was a mercy, in its way, even if it meant Kael would spend the rest of his indefinite existence in a fog of half-awareness, never fully asleep, never fully awake, just floating in the liminal space between. Dr. Cross sometimes wondered what Kael dreamed about when the sedatives allowed dreams to form. Did he dream of his mother's kitchen, of that last normal meal before his curse activated? Did he dream of all the worlds he'd destroyed? Their populations crying out for mercy he couldn't give? Or did he dream of something simpler? Of just being normal again? Of being able to eat an apple without ending reality? She'd tried talking to him once, back in world number 206, during a scheduled maintenance period when they'd had to reduce his sedation levels. His eyes had flickered with awareness, and for a moment, she'd seen the person behind the catastrophe. The young man who'd lost everything through no fault of his own. He'd tried to speak, his voice hoarse from years of disuse, struggling to form words through the drugs still clouding his mind. What he'd said haunted her still. "I'm so hungry." Not physically hungry, the nutrients kept his body fed. Hungry for normalcy. Hungry for life. Hungry for the simple human experience of tasting food, of enjoying a meal, of sharing a table with friends. Hungry for everything his curse had stolen from him. 3 words that contained an ocean of loss, of longing, of a desire that could never be fulfilled because fulfilling it would end the world. They'd sedated him again immediately, but Dr. Cross couldn't forget. Couldn't stop thinking about what it meant to be Kael Vorthen, to exist as nothing more than a threat, a danger, a thing that had to be contained for the safety of everyone else. To have your most basic biological need transformed into a weapon of mass destruction through no action of your own, through simple bad luck and worse timing. The facility's alarm system had different levels, color-coded for various types of emergencies. Green meant normal operations. Yellow meant minor issues, things like power fluctuations or containment field adjustments. Orange meant elevated concern, perhaps unexpected energy readings or anomalous behavior. Red meant immediate danger, active threat, all hands on deck. They'd never needed to use black-level alarms before. Black meant the worst possible scenario. Black meant Kael had eaten something. Black meant world number 999 had minutes, maybe hours, before it joined the list of fallen dimensions. The alarm starts at 3:37 in the morning, local time, though time means little in a facility that exists partially outside normal dimensional flow. Dr. Cross is in her office reviewing containment logs when the lights shift from their normal white to a pulsing crimson that makes her blood run cold even before the klaxon begins its mournful wail. Her hand slams onto the emergency response button as she's already running for the door. Her mind racing through possibilities, through contingencies, through prayers that this is somehow a false alarm. The facility explodes into controlled chaos. Scientists abandon their stations, sprinting for emergency evacuation pods. Security teams mobilize, not to fight, because what could they possibly fight against, but to ensure the evacuation proceeds in order. Support staff activate the dimensional barriers, massive walls of folded space that might, if they're very lucky, contain the destruction for a few precious minutes. And Dr. Cross runs toward the containment chamber, because she needs to see, needs to know how this happened, needs to witness the end she's been working for 200 worlds to prevent. The containment chamber's door is open. Impossible. The door shouldn't be able to open without 6 simultaneous authorization codes, biometric scans, and clearance from the central AI. But it's open, hanging loose on its massive hinges, and inside, Kael is awake. Fully awake, his eyes clear for the first time in years, the sedation somehow purged from his system. And floating in front of him, absurdly mundane in its horror, is an apple. A simple red apple, held in the hand of a man Dr. Cross doesn't recognize. The stranger is dressed in nondescript clothing, his face utterly unremarkable in the way that professional operatives cultivate, the kind of person who could walk through a crowd and be forgotten before they'd even left. He's smiling, a thin expression that doesn't reach his eyes, and he's holding the apple toward Kael with the patience of someone who knows exactly what's about to happen. "No," Dr. Cross breathes, the word barely audible over the blaring alarms. "No, no, no." The stranger glances at her, his smile widening slightly. "Yes," he says, his voice carrying clearly despite the chaos. "After 998 worlds, everyone's gotten complacent. Your security is good, but it's designed to keep him contained, not to keep determined people out. And there are organizations, Dr. Cross, that are very determined indeed." Kael is staring at the apple with an expression that breaks something in Dr. Cross's chest. Hunger. Desperate, overwhelming hunger. Not for the apple specifically, but for what it represents. Years, decades by his reckoning, of being denied the simple act of eating, of tasting, of experiencing the one thing that had destroyed his life, but that every human being takes for granted. His hand trembles as it reaches toward the fruit, and Dr. Cross can see him fighting with himself, see the war between desire and responsibility playing out across his face. "Don't," she says, and now she's moving forward, hand outstretched even though she knows she can't reach him in time. "Kael, please, you know what will happen. You know what you'll do." His eyes meet hers, and for a moment she sees clarity there, understanding, recognition, and underneath it all, a bone-deep exhaustion that speaks to the burden of 998 worlds. "I know," he says, his voice rough with disuse but perfectly clear. "I've always known. But I'm so tired, Dr. Cross, so tired of being a thing, of being a threat, of existing as nothing but a potential apocalypse in a box. Just once, just one more time, I want to remember what it feels like to be human." The stranger pushes the apple forward, and Kael takes it. The weight of it in his palm seems to anchor him, make him real in a way that floating in a containment field never could. He lifts it to his face, breathing in the scent, and Dr. Cross sees tears streaming down his cheeks even as he smiles. "I'm sorry," he whispers. "I'm so sorry." And he bites. The effect isn't immediate. For half a heartbeat, maybe less, nothing happens. Kael chews, swallows, and his eyes close in an expression of such pure relief and satisfaction that it's almost painful to witness. Then his eyes snap open, and they're glowing. Not with fire or light or any simple energy. They're glowing with the fundamental force that underlies reality itself, the power that decides what is and what isn't, what can be and what never will be. Gravity reverses. Not just in the chamber, not just in the facility, but across the entire dimension. World number 999 experiences a moment of perfect weightlessness as every particle, every atom, every quantum of matter suddenly loses its attraction to every other. Then the reverse takes hold, and everything begins to fall upward. Oceans pull themselves into the sky. Mountains lift from the ground like balloons. Continents fracture as their mass tears free from the planetary core. Dr. Cross is falling upward, her body suddenly lighter than air, tumbling through the chamber as the facility's structural integrity fails all around her. She sees the stranger, still smiling, even as he too rises toward what used to be the floor, his mission accomplished. She sees Kael, still holding the half-eaten apple, power radiating from him in waves that make reality itself shimmer and distort. And she sees the world outside the facility, through the cameras that are somehow still broadcasting, sees World 999 tearing itself apart as gravity becomes a suggestion rather than a law. Cities empty into the sky, their buildings and vehicles and people all becoming satellites in an atmosphere that can no longer hold them. The oceans form massive bubbles of water thousands of miles wide, spinning slowly in the void where they used to rest against the land. The planet's core, no longer held in place by the mass above it, begins to expand, molten metal spreading outward in a spherical shell that will eventually consume everything that used to be the surface. And still Kael's power grows, because an apple is complex nutrition, containing sugars and vitamins and minerals and fiber, each component triggering a different aspect of his curse. The gravity manipulation is just the beginning. Matter begins to phase shift, solid objects becoming partially intangible, existing simultaneously in multiple states at once. Time starts to fracture, different parts of the world experiencing chronological flow at different rates, some areas frozen in place while others race forward at impossible speed. The dimensional barriers activate, massive walls of folded space slamming into place around the facility. But they're designed to contain Kael himself, not his power once it's fully manifested. The barriers slow the destruction, buy precious minutes for evacuation ships to launch, for dimensional portals to open, for the fraction of the population that can be saved to escape into other realities. But they can't stop it. Nothing can stop it once it's started. Dr. Cross grabs onto a piece of debris, something that used to be a wall or a console, and uses it to propel herself toward one of the emergency pods. Around her, facility personnel are doing the same, swimming through the air as gravity's rules no longer apply, desperate to reach the escape vectors before the reality collapse reaches the point of no return. She makes it to a pod, straps in alongside 3 scientists, who look as shell-shocked as she feels, and the pod launches, its dimensional drive activating, tearing a hole in reality that leads to world number 1000. As they transition between dimensions, Dr. Cross gets one last look at world 999. It's beautiful, in a horrifying way. The gravity reversal has created structures that could never exist under normal physics, arches of ocean water kilometers high, forests floating like clouds, mountain ranges drifting through the sky like massive stone ships. The planet itself is coming apart, its mass dispersing outward, but slowly, giving everything an almost graceful appearance, like watching a flower bloom, if that flower was the death of an entire dimension. Then the pod completes its transition, and World 999 disappears from view, becoming just another number on the list of casualties. Just another grave in the trail of destruction that follows Kael Vorthen wherever he goes. The pod drifts in dimensional space for a moment, its systems recalibrating, before it locks onto World 1000's dimensional signature and begins the final approach. World 1000 is ready for them. They've been preparing ever since they detected the alarm from 999, ever since they realized that yes, it had finally happened, the containment had finally failed. Massive receiving facilities wait to process the refugees, medical teams stand ready to treat the injured, and in a secure location deep underground, a new containment chamber has already been constructed, more advanced than the last, incorporating lessons learned from 999 failures. But the real question, the one that Dr. Cross can see in the eyes of every authority figure who greets the refugee ships, is simple. Where is Kael? Is he dead? Finally killed by his own power? Has he been captured by whoever orchestrated the breach? Or worse, is he still alive, still loose somewhere in the dimensional flux, potentially consuming things that trigger even more catastrophic abilities? The answer comes 3 days later. A dimensional probe detects a signature in the void between worlds, a pocket of stable space that shouldn't exist. Investigation teams approach cautiously, expecting anything from a trap to a new form of catastrophe. What they find is Kael, floating in a bubble of normal physics that his power is somehow maintaining, unconscious but alive, the half-eaten apple still clutched in his hand. They bring him to World 1000's facility immediately, and this time, they don't take chances. The containment field is stronger, the sedation deeper, the security measures tripled. They perform a full examination, looking for any changes, any new developments in his condition. What they find is terrifying in its implications. His cells have evolved again. The exposure to an entire reality-ending event, while conscious and aware, has somehow strengthened his curse, refined it. The next time he eats, if there is a next time, the effects will manifest faster, spread farther, hit harder. Dr. Cross reads the reports in her new office, in this new facility that's almost identical to the last one, and feels a profound sense of despair. 999 worlds weren't enough. The lesson apparently needed to be beaten into reality's skull one more time. Kael Vorthen cannot eat, will never eat, can never be allowed to eat. And that stranger, that operative who deliberately fed him the apple, remains at large, potentially planning to do it again in World 1000, or 1001, or however many dimensions it takes before someone or something stops him. But there's something else in the reports, something the scientists are cautiously optimistic about. During the transition between worlds, while Kael was unconscious in the dimensional void, his power had been active but directionless. It had been maintaining that bubble of normal physics, protecting him from the chaos of between space, but without the catastrophic reality warping effects. It suggests that maybe, just maybe, if his power could be channeled, focused, controlled somehow, it might be possible to make him safe. Not cured, probably never cured, but safe enough that he wouldn't need to be imprisoned forever. It's a slim hope, barely worth entertaining. But it's more than they've had in 999 worlds. Dr. Cross authorizes a new research initiative, project designation Harmonic Resonance, focused on finding ways to direct Kael's power, rather than just containing it. If they can figure out how to make his consumption-triggered abilities manifest in controlled ways, in specific locations, aimed at specific targets, then maybe Kael Vorthen can become something other than a walking apocalypse. The work is slow, painstaking, requiring cooperation across multiple dimensions and scientific disciplines. They can't experiment on Kael directly. Can't risk him eating anything while they figure out the parameters. Instead, they work with simulations, with dimensional models, with captured samples of his power's energy signature from the various destroyed worlds. They're trying to reverse engineer an impossibility, to understand something that violates every known law of physics and magic. Years pass in World 1000. The facility operates like clockwork, every protocol followed perfectly, every security measure maintained with religious devotion. Kael remains sedated, monitored, contained. The nutrient solution flows through his veins, the containment field hums with power. And in the laboratories far below his chamber, scientists work around the clock, searching for answers that might not exist. Dr. Cross ages visibly, the stress of maintaining vigilance wearing her down. She's no longer the young researcher who'd first encountered Kael in world number 47. She's older now, graying at the temples, lines etched deep around her eyes from countless sleepless nights and stress-filled days. But she refuses to retire, refuses to pass this burden to someone else. Kael is her responsibility, has been her responsibility through 253 worlds now, and she won't abandon him. Sometimes, late at night, when the facility is at minimal staffing and the only sounds are the hum of machinery and the soft breathing of the sedated prisoner, Dr. Cross stands in the observation deck and talks to Kael. He can't hear her, or if he can, he can't respond. but she talks anyway. Tells him about the research progress, about the worlds they've saved by keeping him contained, about her own life and the family she lost, back in World 47. She tells him things she's never told anyone else, about the nightmares she has, visions of all 999 worlds dying simultaneously, their deaths playing out in her dreams like some horrific highlight reel, about the guilt she feels for keeping him locked up, for denying him the basic human right to eat, even though she knows that letting him eat would be far worse, about her fear that they'll never find a solution, that Kael will remain imprisoned forever, or at least until the next security breach, until the next world falls. And she tells him the truth that she can barely admit to herself. That part of her, a small, terrible part, wishes he died in world number 1, before they knew what he was, before the trail of destruction could grow so long. It would have been kinder. 16 billion people would still have died, but it would have been one tragedy instead of 999, one world instead of countless dimensions, each with their own civilizations, their own cultures, their own irreplaceable histories. But Kael didn't die, and he won't die because his power won't let him. So they maintain the vigil, keep the prison running, continue the research. And Dr. Cross keeps talking to him in the dark, sharing her burden with the only other person who truly understands what they've both lost, even if he can't respond. The breakthrough comes in year 17 of World 1000. A junior researcher named Finn Alexi, someone who'd grown up in World 997 before its fall, discovers something in the power signature analysis that everyone else had missed. Kael's power doesn't just respond to the act of eating, it responds to the intent behind eating. Every time he'd consumed something in the past, he'd done so with the simple human intention of satisfying hunger, of enjoying food, of taking in nutrition. That broad, unfocused intent had allowed his power to manifest in equally broad, unfocused, catastrophic ways. But what if the intent was specific? What if, before eating, Kael focused his consciousness on a particular outcome, a particular target, a particular purpose? The power's response would still be overwhelming, would still violate normal physics, but it might be directable, aimed, weaponized in a way that could be useful rather than catastrophic. The theory is sound, but testing it requires something they've been desperately trying to avoid for 1,000 worlds. It requires Kael to eat something while conscious and aware, with focused intent, in a controlled environment. The risk is astronomical. If the theory is wrong, if intent doesn't matter, or if Kael can't maintain focus during the power manifestation, World 1000 becomes World 1001. Everything they've built, everyone they've saved, all the work of 17 years, gone in an instant. Dr. Cross brings the proposal to the Oversight Council, a gathering of dimensional authorities from across the multiverse who have ultimate say over how Kael is handled. The debate is fierce. Half the council wants to shut down the experiment immediately, arguing that no potential benefit is worth the risk of another world-ending event. The other half argues that they can't keep Kael imprisoned forever, that eventually, inevitably, someone will breach containment again, and when that happens, it would be useful to know if his power can be controlled. The deciding vote comes from an unlikely source, a representative from World Number 1, or rather, from the organization that had overseen World Number 1 before its destruction. They've been silent throughout Kael's long imprisonment, neither condemning nor supporting, simply observing. But now their representative, an elderly woman whose entire family died in that first catastrophe, stands to speak. Kael Vorthen didn't choose his curse, she says, her voice steady despite the emotion behind it. He didn't ask to become a weapon. He was 16 years old, sitting in his mother's kitchen, eating soup. Just a boy doing something boys do. And in an instant, through no fault of his own, he became responsible for the deaths of billions. We've made him into a thing, a threat, a prisoner. Maybe it's time we gave him a chance to become a person again. If there's even a possibility that he can control his power, We owe it to him to try. The vote passes. Barely. By a single vote, the council authorizes the experiment. But they set conditions. Strict conditions. The test will take place not in World 1000, but in a specially constructed pocket dimension, a small bubble of reality created specifically for this purpose, anchored to nothing, touching nothing, existing in complete isolation from the rest of the multiverse. If Kael's power manifests uncontrollably, the pocket dimension will be sealed and destroyed, taking Kael with it. No more evacuations, no more narrow escapes. This time, if it goes wrong, it ends permanently. Dr. Cross spends 3 days preparing. 3 days to brief the team, to review emergency protocols, to make peace with the fact that she might be about to witness the death of the person she's devoted half her life to protecting. Finn's theory is brilliant. But theories and reality don't always align, especially where Kael's power is concerned. They transport him while still sedated, moving his containment field whole into the pocket dimension. The space is small, barely 100 meters across, containing only the essential monitoring equipment and a single, carefully selected piece of food. An orange. Simple, nutritious, but not so complex that multiple aspects of his power will trigger simultaneously. If the theory works, the orange's properties will manifest as energy manipulation, specifically the ability to generate and control pure force. Dangerous, certainly, but directional. Something that can be aimed away from anything important. The sedation reduction begins slowly, carefully monitored. Kael's consciousness rises like a swimmer surfacing from deep water, his awareness returning in gradual stages. His eyes open, and for a moment there's confusion, disorientation. Then memory returns, and his expression shifts to something bleak and resigned. Again? He asks, his voice rough from 17 years of minimal use. Another test? Another chance to destroy another world? Dr. Cross is there, her image projected into the pocket dimension through a communication link. Not a test, she says. A chance. Maybe the only chance you'll ever get. Finn, show him the data. The young researcher appears in split screen, presenting the theory of intent-driven manifestation. Kael listens, his expression unchanging, as Finn explains how focus might allow directional control, how specific goals might channel the power's expression. As the explanation concludes, Kael is silent for a long moment. "You want me to eat something," he finally says, while thinking very hard about what I want the power to do, and you think that might make me not destroy the dimension I'm in. That's the theory. That's what 999 Worlds has taught you. Intent matters. It's more complex than that, Finn starts, but Kael cuts him off with a bitter laugh. No, it's exactly that simple. And you know what? You're probably right. I've felt it, every time. The power responding to my state of mind, to what I was thinking about when it activated. In World 47, I was thinking about Dr. Cross's family, about how much I'd taken from her. The power manifested as something that specifically targeted emotional bonds, breaking them. In World 112, I was thinking about wanting to disappear, and the power tried to make me do exactly that. Intent matters. I've always known that. I just never had the presence of mind to control it when the power was active. He looks at the orange sitting on the pedestal in front of him. So now I'm supposed to pick up that orange, eat it while thinking very specifically about where I want the force to go, and trust that I can maintain that focus while reality-warping power floods through me. If I succeed, maybe you can find a way to use me for something other than being a threat. If I fail, this pocket dimension gets sealed and I finally get to die. You don't have to do this, Dr. Cross says, though they both know that's not entirely true. We can keep you sedated, keep you safe. Safe, Kael repeats, and the word drips with irony. Safe for everyone else. I haven't been safe since I was 16 years old. But you know what? Fine. I'll try your experiment. Not for you. Not for the council. But for me. Because I want to know if there's any chance, any possibility at all, that I can be something other than a walking apocalypse. And if I can't, if this fails, at least it'll be over. He reaches for the orange. His hand trembles, not with fear, but with the weight of what this moment represents. 999 worlds of destruction, of being a thing instead of a person, comes down to whether he can maintain focus long enough to eat a single piece of fruit without ending everything. The orange feels real in his hand, solid, tangible. The first thing he's held in 17 years. He can smell it. The citrus scent sharp and clean and so overwhelmingly normal that it makes his eyes water. His thumb digs into the peel, breaking it, juice running over his fingers. The scent intensifies, and he has to close his eyes for a moment, overwhelmed by sensation. Focus. Finn's voice comes through the link. Before you eat, establish your intent. Be specific. Visualize exactly what you want the power to do. Kael nods. In his mind, he constructs an image. The force energy that the orange will grant him, he wants it to manifest as a directed beam, shooting straight upward, away from anything that could be harmed. A column of pure force, rising from his position to the edge of the pocket dimension, and then dissipating into the void. Specific, directional, controlled. He peels the orange slowly, deliberately, maintaining his focus on that image. The segments come apart easily, and he brings one to his mouth. Before he eats, he opens his eyes, looking directly at where he knows Dr. Cross is watching from. If this works, he says, if I can actually control it, then maybe we can talk about what happens next, about whether there's a way I can help repair even a fraction of the damage I've caused. But if it doesn't work, if this pocket dimension starts to collapse, you seal it immediately. No hesitation, no attempts to save me. Promise me that. I promise, Dr. Cross says, and the words taste like ash, but she means them. Kael eats the orange segment. The flavor explodes across his tongue, sweet and tart, and so intense after years of nothing but nutrient solution that it's almost painful. And then the power comes. It roars into existence inside him, energy flooding his cells, his consciousness expanding to encompass forces that could reshape reality. His vision goes white with power, his body rigid as limitless force concentrates in his core. This is the moment where he's always lost control, where the power has overwhelmed his consciousness, turned him into a conduit for apocalypse. But this time, he has the image. The mental construct of directed force shooting upward. He clings to it like a drowning man clinging to driftwood, feeling the power try to spread, try to manifest in all directions at once, and he forces it into the channel he's created in his mind. The effect is immediate and terrifying. A column of force erupts from Kael's position, a beam of concentrated energy wider than his body, shooting toward the pocket dimension's ceiling. The monitoring equipment registers power levels that shouldn't be possible. Energy output equivalent to multiple star cores, all contained in a stream barely 5 meters wide. The force hits the dimensional boundary and doesn't stop, punching through the edge of the pocket space and dissipating into the void beyond. Kael is conscious through all of it, aware and focused, maintaining the direction even as the power tries to break free. Sweat pours down his face. His entire body shakes with the effort of containing and controlling something that was never meant to be contained or controlled. But he doesn't let go, doesn't lose focus. The beam continues upward, a controlled release that's devastating in its own right, but directional, aimed, exactly what Finn's theory predicted. Then the orange segment is fully metabolized, the power source depleted, and the beam cuts off. The sudden absence of force is almost shocking, like a thunderstorm ending mid-strike. Kael collapses, his legs giving out, and he ends up on his hands and knees, gasping for air, his entire body trembling with exhaustion. But the pocket dimension is intact. The equipment is still functioning. And most importantly, Kael is still conscious, still aware, still himself. Dr. Cross is shouting something through the communication link, but Kael can't process the words. He's too busy crying. Great racking sobs that shake his entire frame. Not from pain or fear, but from relief. After 999 worlds, after decades of being a prisoner to his own cursed existence, he just proved that control is possible. Difficult, exhausting, requiring focus that borders on meditation, but possible. The implications unfold over the following weeks, like a flower of hope blooming in the darkness of despair. With intent-driven control, Kael doesn't have to remain imprisoned. He can eat, carefully, slowly, with proper preparation and focus, releasing his power in controlled bursts that can be directed away from populated areas. More than that, if his abilities can be weaponized through intent, he becomes something the multiverse has never had access to before. A living weapon of such devastating potential that it makes conventional armies obsolete. The dimensional authorities convene, and this time the debate is different. Not about whether to keep Kael contained, but about how to help him develop his newfound control, how to train him to use his curse as a tool. Representatives from World 1000, still scarred by World 999's fall, argue for caution. Others, particularly military leaders from dimensions currently at war, see opportunity. A being who can reshape reality by eating could end conflicts, could defend against threats that normal forces can't handle. Dr. Cross watches the debate with mixed feelings. Part of her is thrilled that Kael might finally have a chance at something resembling a life. Another part is terrified of what he could become if the military authorities get their way, if he's turned into a weapon to be deployed against enemies both foreign and domestic. And a small, persistent part of her wonders if they're opening a door that should have remained sealed. Kael himself has surprisingly strong opinions about his future. When finally consulted, brought before the Dimensional Council while still weak from his first successful directed manifestation, he's blunt to the point of rudeness. "I destroyed 999 worlds," he says, his voice carrying clearly through the council chamber. "Not because I wanted to, not because I was evil or malicious or insane, but because I couldn't control what I'd become. Now I can. Maybe not perfectly, not yet. But the foundation is there. And you want to know what I think should happen next?" He looks around the chamber, meeting the eyes of representatives from dozens of dimensions, beings of various species and power levels, all hanging on his words. "I think I should be allowed to help rebuild, not through force or violence or becoming someone's weapon, but through controlled application of my abilities to restore what was lost. Can I bring back the dead? No. Can I undo 999 apocalypses? No. But maybe I can create new things? Build new structures. Generate resources. Use these cursed powers for something other than destruction." The proposal is controversial. Some council members see wisdom in it. A way for Kael to redeem himself while contributing to the multiverse's recovery. Others see it as impossibly dangerous, arguing that no matter how good his control becomes, the risk of a relapse, of another uncontrolled manifestation, remains too high. The debate goes on for days, with Kael waiting in a secured facility while his fate is decided by others, as it has been since World Number 2. The compromise they reach is typically bureaucratic. Kael will be allowed limited freedom under constant supervision. He'll train with his newly discovered control, working with specialists to refine his focus and expand his ability to direct his power. Once his control is deemed reliable, he'll be allowed to undertake carefully planned projects, using specific foods to trigger specific abilities for specific purposes. But he'll never be unsupervised. He'll always wear monitoring equipment, and the emergency protocols remain in place. One sign of losing control, one indication that his focus is slipping, and he'll be sedated and contained immediately. It's better than being imprisoned. Better than floating in a containment field for the rest of existence. But it's not freedom, not really. More like a longer leash, a slightly larger cage. Kael accepts it anyway, because what choice does he have? And because there's work to be done, amends to make, even if those amends will never be enough to balance the scales of 999 worlds. The training is brutal. Not physically. Kael's powers protect him from harm, but mentally and emotionally. Learning to maintain perfect focus while reality-warping energy floods through him requires a level of meditation and self-control that monks spend lifetimes pursuing. Finn becomes his primary instructor, the young researcher who discovered intent-driven manifestation, taking responsibility for helping Kael master it. They start small, individual grapes, each one consumed with specific intent, the resulting power directed into contained spaces designed to absorb whatever energy manifests. Kael learns to differentiate between types of food, to predict what properties will trigger what abilities. Proteins tend toward matter manipulation, carbohydrates toward energy control, fats toward dimensional warping. It's not a perfect correlation. The complexity of food creates infinite variations, but patterns emerge. By month 6, he can eat an entire meal while maintaining control, though it requires such intense focus that he ends up exhausted, barely able to stand. By month 12, he's learned to layer his intentions, consuming multiple food types and creating complex combined effects. Energy and matter manipulation together. Dimensional warping guided by conscious will. Reality bending according to his design, rather than random catastrophe. Dr. Cross watches his progress with pride and fear in equal measure. Pride because he's accomplishing something that should have been impossible, proving that even the worst curses can potentially be overcome with enough determination. Fear because she knows what happens when things seem too good to be true. The multiverse has a way of introducing chaos when order seems established. The chaos comes in the form of world number 1001. A peaceful dimension, one that hadn't seen major conflict in centuries, suddenly experiences a catastrophic event. A massive surge of dimensional energy rips through their reality, unstabilizing the fundamental forces that hold matter together. Within hours, entire continents begin phase shifting, becoming partially intangible, existing simultaneously in multiple states. The effect spreads, threatening to collapse their entire dimension into quantum uncertainty. The dimensional authorities are baffled. This isn't a natural phenomenon. Someone or something is actively attacking World 1001, using power signatures that are disturbingly familiar. After analysis, the terrible truth becomes clear. These energy patterns match Kael's, specifically the reality warping effects he generated when he destroyed world number 7. Someone has found a way to replicate his power. The implications are staggering. If Kael's abilities can be duplicated, even in limited form, it means the multiverse has a new category of threat to worry about. Engineered apocalypses. Manufactured reality collapses. And whoever has this technology has just proven they're willing to use it. Kael volunteers immediately. If someone is using a copy of his power to attack worlds, he's the only one who understands that power intimately enough to potentially stop it. The authorities are reluctant, worried that deploying him could make the situation worse, but they're also desperate. World 1001 has days, maybe weeks, before the quantum instability reaches critical mass. Normal intervention methods aren't working. They need something extraordinary. So they send Kael, along with Dr. Cross, Finn, and a security team large enough to constitute a small army. He goes with a prepared meal, specific foods chosen to trigger abilities that might counter the phase-shifting effect. Matter manipulation to restore solid state. Energy control to stabilize the dimensional fabric. And if all else fails, pure destructive force to potentially overload the attacking energy and burn it out. World 1001 is beautiful in its dying. The phase shifting creates effects that shouldn't exist. Buildings that are simultaneously solid and ghostly. Forests where trees occupy multiple physical states at once. Oceans that are partly liquid and partly pure energy. It's like walking through a dream that's slowly becoming a nightmare, and Kael feels the familiar weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. Another world in danger. Another potential apocalypse. But this time, maybe he can be the solution instead of the cause. They track the energy source to a research facility on the world's largest continent, a complex that shouldn't exist according to any records. Someone built it in secret, hidden from authorities, and from within it. The reality warping effect is being broadcast across the entire dimension. Kael's team approaches cautiously, but they're met with no resistance. The facility's doors are open, inviting them in, and when they enter, they find the source of the attack. It's not a machine, not a weapon. It's a person, or what used to be a person. The being in the central chamber has been modified beyond recognition, their body replaced with crystalline matrices that pulse with stolen power. Their consciousness expanded and twisted to house the energy signatures they've collected from Kael's destroyed worlds. They've turned themselves into a living amplifier for his curse, capable of triggering reality-warping effects without needing to eat, without the biological component that made Kael unique. And sitting beside this transformed being, calm and collected, is the stranger from World 999, the man who'd fed Kael the apple. He smiles when he sees them enter, that same thin expression that doesn't reach his eyes. "Welcome," he says. "I was hoping you'd come. After all, this is all for you, Kael Vorthen. Everything we've done, every modification, every enhancement, it's been in service of understanding your gift. And now that we understand it, now that we can replicate it, we can finally use it properly." Kael stares at the crystalline being, feeling a horror that goes beyond words. "What did you do to them?" he asks, his voice barely above a whisper. "We made them better," the stranger replies. "Your power is incredible, but it's limited by biology, by the need to consume physical matter to trigger effects. Our volunteer here, they've transcended those limitations. They can reshape reality at will, drawing on stored energy signatures from all the worlds you destroyed. In a sense, you made them possible. Your curse gave them life." The security team raises their weapons, but the stranger just laughs. "Shoot if you want. It won't change anything. The phase shift attack is self-sustaining now, fed by ambient dimensional energy. World 1001 will fall within 48 hours, joining your impressive tally of destruction. But unlike your uncontrolled catastrophes, this one serves a purpose. It's a demonstration. Proof that reality-warping power can be weaponized, deployed strategically, used to advance specific goals." "And what goal is that?" Dr. Cross demands, her hand on her own sidearm. "World domination? Multiverse conquest? What could possibly justify what you're doing?" The stranger's expression turns serious. "Survival. The multiverse is dying, Dr. Cross. Not quickly, not obviously, but inevitably. The infinite expansion is reaching critical mass. Dimensions are becoming unstable. Resources are depleting. In 1,000 years, maybe less, reality itself will collapse into entropy. Unless someone takes action. Unless someone with sufficient power reshapes the multiverse's fundamental structure, creates new laws, new physics, new rules that allow sustainable existence." He gestures to the crystalline being. "This is just the beginning, a test case. Once we refine the process, once we understand exactly how to harness reality-warping power, we can begin the real work, redesigning the multiverse from the ground up, making it stable, making it safe, making it eternal. And all it costs is a few thousand worlds used as testing grounds." Kael feels rage building in his chest, hot and terrible. "You're insane. You're destroying worlds to save worlds. That's not salvation. That's genocide with extra steps." "Is it different from what you did?" the stranger asks mildly. "You destroyed 999 worlds through accident and curse. We're destroying them deliberately, with purpose, toward a goal that benefits all of reality, which is more moral." The argument is cut short when the crystalline being screams. Not vocally, they no longer have vocal cords, but psychically, a sound that echoes through dimensions and makes everyone in the room clutch their heads in pain. The phase-shifting attack intensifies, reality itself beginning to fracture under the strain. The facility starts coming apart, walls becoming translucent, floors shifting between solid and intangible. The stranger curses, manipulating controls on a panel, trying to stabilize his creation. But the crystalline being is losing coherence, the stolen power signatures conflicting with each other, creating feedback loops that amplify into cascading failure. This is what happens when you try to contain forces that were never meant to be contained, when you weaponize power that exists to violate natural laws. Kael makes a decision. He pulls out the prepared meal he brought, specifically designed for this scenario. High protein, high carbohydrate, high everything, a nutritional bomb that will trigger multiple aspects of his power simultaneously. Dr. Cross sees what he's doing and tries to stop him, but Finn holds her back. Trust him, Finn says. He knows what he's doing. Kael eats quickly, mechanically, his focus already building the intense structure that will guide his power. He needs matter manipulation to restore the phase-shifted regions, energy control to absorb and neutralize the attacking signal, and dimensional warping to contain the crystalline being's collapse, to prevent it from spreading further. 3 distinct intents, 3 separate channels, all maintained simultaneously, while reality-warping energy floods through him. The effect is spectacular. Power erupts from Kael in 3 distinct streams, each one targeting a different aspect of the crisis. Matter solidifies, returning to single-state existence. Energy dissipates, absorbed into Kael's own infinite reserves, and a dimensional bubble forms around the facility, trapping the crystalline being's death throes within a separate space where they can't harm the outside world. The strain is incredible. Kael feels his consciousness stretching, trying to maintain focus on 3 separate intents, while each one requires total concentration. His body becomes a conduit for forces that could unmake reality, and for a moment, he understands what the stranger meant about redesigning the multiverse. With enough power and control, anything becomes possible, even the impossible. But he doesn't have enough power or control. Not yet. Maybe not ever. One of the channels wavers, the dimensional containment flickering, and Kael realizes with horrible clarity that he's about to fail. He can stop 2 aspects of the crisis, but not 3. If he lets the containment fail, the crystalline being's collapse will spread, potentially destroying World 1001 entirely. If he lets matter manipulation fail, the phase shifting continues, slower but inevitable. If he lets energy control fail, the attacking signal resumes, sustaining the phase shift indefinitely. Choose. In the span of a heartbeat, Kael has to choose which failure he can live with, which disaster he allows to happen. And he makes the hardest choice of all. He lets the matter manipulation fail. The phase shifting will continue, but slowly, buying time for evacuation, for other solutions. The crystalline being's collapse will be contained, preventing immediate catastrophe. And the energy control will shut down the attacking signal, stopping the source of the problem. It's not a perfect solution. It's not even a good solution. But it's the best he can do, and as the meal metabolizes and his power begins to fade, Kael feels something he hasn't felt since before World Number 1. Pride. Not in the destruction he's caused, but in the destruction he's prevented. He couldn't save World 1001 completely, but he saved it partially, and that's more than he's managed in 999 previous worlds. The dimensional bubble collapses, the crystalline being's remains reduced to inert crystal dust that scatters across the facility floor. The stranger is gone, escaped during the chaos. But for now, that doesn't matter. The immediate crisis is over. World 1001 survives, wounded but alive, and they have time now to implement proper restoration protocols to reverse the remaining phase shifting through conventional means. Kael collapses, utterly spent, and Dr. Cross catches him before he hits the ground. "You did it," she says, and there are tears in her eyes. 999 worlds of destruction, and now you've saved one. Not perfectly, but enough. It's not enough, Kael whispers, his consciousness fading. It'll never be enough. But it's a start. They transport him back to World 1000 while he's unconscious, and when he wakes, it's in the facility he'd thought he'd left behind. For a moment, panic sets in. Did they decide he was too dangerous after all? Is he back in containment? Back in the floating prison that had been his home for so long? But then he sees that the containment field is inactive. He's lying in a normal bed, in a normal room, with normal doors that aren't sealed shut. And sitting beside the bed, looking exhausted but relieved, is Dr. Cross. "Welcome back," she says. "You've been out for 3 days. Your body needed time to recover from channeling that much power, maintaining that much focus. But you're going to be fine." "World 1001? Kael asks, his voice hoarse. "Still there, still damaged but stable. Evacuation is ongoing, and restoration teams are working around the clock. You bought them enough time. The phase shifting will be completely reversed in about 6 months." She pauses, her expression becoming serious. "The council wants to talk to you about what happened, about the stranger and his organization, about what this means for the future." Kael sits up slowly, every muscle aching. "Let me guess. They want me to hunt down whoever's stealing my power signature, turn me into a weapon against the people trying to weaponize me." "Something like that." Dr. Cross sighs. "I tried to argue against it, but after what you did in World 1001, they've seen what you're capable of when properly motivated. And honestly, Kael, I think you might be the only one who can stop these people. You understand your power better than anyone. You know what they're trying to do, how they're trying to do it. If anyone can shut down their operation, it's you." The request hangs in the air between them. Kael knows he could refuse, could demand to be left alone, to be allowed to continue his rehabilitation in peace. But he also knows that won't happen. The multiverse doesn't leave people like him in peace. There's always another crisis, another disaster, another situation that requires his unique abilities. And after 999 worlds of being a passive destroyer, maybe it's time to be an active defender. "All right," he says. "I'll do it. But on one condition. I choose my team, and I get final say on missions. No more being deployed like a weapon, no more being used without consent. If they want my help, it's on my terms." Dr. Cross smiles, a real smile that reaches her eyes. "I'll make sure they agree. And Kael? I want to be on your team, not as a monitor or a keeper. As a partner. Someone who's seen what you're capable of, both the destruction and the salvation, and still believes you can make a difference. It's the beginning of something new. Not redemption because 999 worlds can't be redeemed, not forgiveness because the dead can't forgive, but maybe purpose, maybe meaning. Kael Vorthen, the man who destroyed nearly 1,000 worlds through the simple act of eating, becomes something else. A hunter, tracking down those who would replicate his curse. A defender, using his terrible power to protect rather than destroy. A living reminder that even the worst things can potentially be turned toward good if someone cares enough to try. The journey won't be easy. The stranger and his organization are out there, continuing their work, building more crystalline beings, testing more reality-warping weapons, and somewhere in the multiverse there are probably other accidents waiting to happen, other Kael Vorthens being created by chance and misfortune, other curses that need to be understood and controlled. But for the first time since he was 16, sitting in his mother's kitchen in a world that no longer exists, Kael has hope. Not for absolution, not for normal life, but for the possibility that his curse, his terrible destructive power, can serve something larger than itself. That the man who can end worlds by eating might also be the man who saves them. And in her office in World 1000, Dr. Yenna Cross files her report with the Dimensional Council. recommending full approval for Kael's operation. She attaches a personal note, something she's never done before in all her years of service. It says simply, 999 worlds taught us what happens when we treat Kael as a thing. Maybe World 1000 can teach us what happens when we treat him as a person. The Council approves, the mission parameters are set, the team is assembled, and Kael Vorthen, the man who's caused more death and destruction than any being in recorded multiverse history, prepares to hunt down those who would use his power for their own ends. He doesn't know if he'll succeed, doesn't know if redemption is possible, or if he's just delaying the inevitable moment when his control fails and the World 1000 becomes World 1001. But he's going to try. For Dr. Cross, who never gave up on him. For Finn, who discovered that control was possible. For the billions who died in 999 worlds, who deserve better than to have their deaths be meaningless. And for himself, because after decades of being nothing but a threat, he wants to know if he can be something more. If the boy who ate soup and ended a world can become the man who eats with purpose and saves them. So if you've enjoyed this story about the most dangerous being in the multiverse, the man whose very act of eating brings apocalypse, make sure to like and subscribe, because Kael Vorthen's journey is just beginning, and the multiverse has more threats than any one person can handle alone, even if that person can reshape reality with every meal. Next time, we'll explore what happens when Kael encounters someone who isn't trying to replicate his power, but to consume it, to steal his curse and make it their own. Until then, remember that even the worst things can potentially serve good purposes, and that control is always possible, even when it seems impossible. Thanks for watching.